Hello and welcome to Juliet and Lucy's Quiet Leadership Revolution, the podcast for senior and aspiring leaders who want to make their voice heard and their impact felt through thoughtful, reflective, confident leadership. I'm Juliet Corbett. I'm an executive coach and strategist, and I work one-to-one with senior leaders, guiding them to find their strategic focus, empower their teams, and regain control over their time.
And I'm Lucy Gower. I'm a facilitator, trainer and coach, and I empower leaders to build their happy, confident and high-performing teams. Today we're going to be talking about hope. It feels like over the last few weeks I've had quite a lot of conversations with leaders about the importance of being hopeful. But actually, when I started to pick under the surface, that everyone had a slightly different take on what they meant by that. So we thought it might be a helpful podcast episode to kind of define what are we talking about when we talking about hope? Is it just like this like fluffy thing in the future? Like, what is it? So quite Juliet, my first question is like, let's define what it is and let's think about why it's important.
Yeah. So interesting, and this is why I love doing this podcast. When you suggested doing this as a topic, I instinctively knew it was a really good thing to talk about. And the research that I did coming into this recording showed that actually I didn't necessarily have a full understanding of what hope is. I think I was thinking it was quite fluffy, kind of we just wing it and talk about hope. What I realized the more I did the research was actually it was refining what I thought of it as. So one of the definitions that I found that I really liked, and I put some links in the episode notes to where I found this. So there was this definition I came across. It says, hope is a vision for something in your future. So it has a future orientation. It's fueled by both positive feelings, so there's an emotional component to it, and inspired actions. So there's a motivation, kind of action bias to it. And when I started reading that, I thought, okay, this has got more depth to it than I'd initially realized. And I was intrigued by this idea that it's not just this fluffy emotion that we feel. It's not an emotion in itself. It's kind of a way of seeing the world that combines looking to the future, a positive emotional kind of spectrum of feelings, but also action. How about you, Lucy? Have you come across good definitions?
So I had a similar experience. There's two things that happened when I started to research hope. Actually, three things. One, I think sometimes we can get hope and optimism muddled up. And there's several people talk to me about, it's not mindless optimism. Like hope anchors into a belief that you can do something and taking action. So the research that I've done is around, it's a combination of setting goals, having the tenacity and perseverance to pursue them, and believing in our own abilities to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So the third bit of that is when I was researching this, I was like, Juliet, it's strategy. It's actually a lot of the things that you talk about when we're talking about strategy comes up in this definition.
It does.
Hope. I got overexcited about it on your behalf, if I'm honest. But I'm sensing that Juliet's not nearly as excited as I am.
I love that you're getting more excited about strategy than I am. No, it is. There is a massive overlap, and it feels like that sense of looking to the future and having a vision of what you want to be doing. So that kind of goal orientation is obvious overlap with strategy. Hope requires you to have what some researchers call a pathway. So you've got that pathway to knowing what are the steps you're going to take to make it happen. Yeah, 100% strategy. And then self-belief isn't necessarily part of strategy, but it's something that I talk about all the time, because if you don't believe that you can be strategic, it's going to be really hard to actually take on a strategic thinking mindset.
Yeah. And for me, there's something around, I suppose, your growth mindset within that. So you can set goals, you can set a point in the future, and you can feel hopeful that you're going to achieve it. But there's a belief. It's not just hope formed out of nothing. It's hope because you can believe that you can do it, or you and your team can do it, or your organization can do it. So it's not an emotion. in itself,
Yeah.
hope, it involves action in order
Yeah.
to get to where you want to
I
go.
think that overlap to growth mindset is really important. So that belief isn't, I believe the stars will align and fate will intervene. We're not talking about that kind of belief. We're saying,
Yeah.
I believe or we believe in our abilities, our experiences, the fact that we will learn things along the way, the fact that not everything will go well, but we'll pivot and change and be agile in what we're doing. And because of our rooted belief in our team or organization's capabilities in all that way and the way that we can be agile, we believe we'll get there. But it's not sort
Yeah.
of a faith in something which is completely non-evidence based or kind of unrooted from a reality that we can see in front of us now.
Yes, that makes absolute sense. And I think there's something in there around perhaps tenacity, resilience. Like we are hopeful that we can achieve this. How we do it, we might need to try different things in order to get there. I've heard it described as like plan B.
Mm-hmm.
Like plan A doesn't work, you don't give up because you're still hopeful and have belief, self-belief, belief in the team that you can do it. But
Yeah,
it's absolutely attached to the actions that you're taking. I think
yeah.
that's the bit that was the biggest learning for me as I was doing some of this research. It's
Mm.
not just like a sort of wafty thought, it sits within a goal and a plan
Yeah,
in order to get
yeah.
to where you said that you wanted to get to.
And interesting, actually, I don't know whether how I went down a couple of rabbit holes in my research. I was going to look at academic papers, and there's a lot of people doing a lot of research out there, which is very scientifically rooted within the psychology framework of
Ah,
affectation, so kind of emotion and all that kind of side of things, as well as the psychology behind motivation and looking at that. So it's really interesting work that's going on out there.
mm,
Just one thing that you mentioned there that brought back a memory for me was about a decade ago, someone said to me, Juliet, you've always got another plan. I think it was in response to one of my plans or one of our plans not working. It was like, yeah, but we can do this instead. It's like constantly, like, you've always got another plan. And I just quipped back without even thinking about it. Yeah, I've got a plan. I've got hope.
yeah,
And even at the moment I said it, I was like, oh, there's something deep and meaningful in there. Like, if I've got a
yeah,
plan, I've got hope. There's that sense that I had in that moment equated that positive feeling about the future and that belief in the
yeah,
future with knowing that even if plan A had failed, I've got plan B.
yeah.
In fact, I have plan C, D. I
Of
have
course.
many plans
Yeah,
behind plan A.
yeah,
And that's what fuels my hope, actually, I
yeah.
think. Yeah.
So yes, there's it's like this fundamental belief that there'll be another way,
Yeah.
the kind of a gritty determination. And for me, what I hear in that is that there's self-belief. It's like, okay, plan A didn't work. I'm not going to like chuck everything in and sit and feel upset about it. I've got plan B, plan C,
Yeah.
plan, however many, because
Yeah.
you have faith in your own abilities to be able to progress that.
Yeah, and even if plan B isn't clear yet, because you haven't prearranged it, you haven't predetermined it, there's a belief that you and your team, well, we can always do plan B. Like, there'll
Yeah,
always be another plan
yeah.
because there's always another route, another pathway to delivering those goals.
Yeah, and this reminds me of the session where we talked about creativity, that for any problem, there's a whole range of different solutions.
Yeah,
The nuance, if you like, is choosing which is the one that's going to get you there quickest or with the least
yeah.
amount of resource, which kind of loops back round to, how you talk about strategy.
Actually, just as we were saying there about the overlap between hope and strategy, that was the bit that I think is missing from hope. Hope on its own isn't necessarily going to give you a framework for making choices about
Hmm.
what pathway or what steps to take to reach that goal. And what you just said there, creative problem solving,
Mm.
there's also an element of let's find, okay, we want creative options, but actually also looking for efficient options that get us to what
Yeah,
we're trying to achieve.
yeah,
So there's maybe hope on its own might not guide you as to which path to take, but there are other frameworks around creativity, around
yeah,
strategy, what might create more of a framework around how to make those choices
yeah,
about
and
which options.
how to make the best choices.
Yeah. Mm.
And I think there's something, I don't want to dwell on why we need hope, but I think I'd like to nod to it.
Hmm.
Certainly with a lot of the teams and leaders that I'm working with, there's, talk about how the world's really uncertain, perhaps feels more uncertain than it has done in our lifetimes. Don't
Yeah.
perhaps
Yeah.
over egging it. And that there's lots of change, and we need to be able to be flexible to be able to respond to that. And we need to have hope and believe in ourselves that we can navigate through this well. Um,
Yeah.
so perhaps it's more important discussion point and research point now than ever before.
I think
I
that's
just
right.
want to check in with you.
Yeah. No, I definitely feel that. And the conversations that I have with other people point to a kind of almost like an untethering that sometimes we can experience of we're kind of constantly dipping in and out of the news on our phones, that we're kind of constantly
Yeah.
bombarded with problems around the world that actually in reality we probably can't really solve. Or, if we picked one or two and dedicate a lifetime to, we can make a difference, and we can make a difference, but we're not designed to be bombarded by problems we can't solve all the time. And I think
Mm,
with especially kind of geopolitical, climate change, things that are happening within individual economies or indeed within individual organizations to do with the impact of different taxation shifts and so on. And I know kind of national insurance contributions here in the UK, employees' national insurance, there's been kind of a
mm,
trigger for some of these conversations, but there's examples worldwide, globally. And it can trigger that sense of hopelessness.
mm-hmm.
And one of the things I loved in the research that I was doing was hope is something you can learn. I love this idea we can teach it, we can learn it. It's not an innate way of being that you've either got or not got. It's actually you can cultivate a,
Yeah.
a hopeful way of looking at the world. I think the more that we're surrounded by challenges, the more that actually we can do this on purpose and actually cultivate hope within ourselves and within our teams.
Yeah, and I think it sits so closely to growth mindset, choosing that
Yeah.
if something hasn't worked so well, what have you learned from it? And you can move on and do plan B, C.
Mm,
And certainly the research around growth mindset is that just knowing it as a term and what it is can help you to then be able to implement it. And I'm going to draw a conclusion, which may or may not be right, that the same applies to hope. If you know that you're making a choice, I'm going to approach this with a hopeful mindset or
yeah.
with a hopeless mindset. You
Mm-hmm.
can frame things in a different lens, which might be helpful. And certainly when I think about a lot of the work around change within organizations, the energy of a leader has a big ripple effect on the team. So if you have a hopeful leader, the chances are that the members of the team are also going to mirror that and feed from that. That's
Yeah.
now saying hope's an emotion, an energy, a feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But if your leader is feeling hopeless and that there's no point, let's just give up, we're not going to make a difference anyway, then that's very difficult to keep going
Yeah.
when that's going on. So you have a choice, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we're human, so we feed off each other, and we sense these things without realizing it. So all of the way that the body language, the tone of voice, the way that questions are asked, all of this signals to others either a mindset which is full of hope, or an approach which is full of hope, or one that just feels a bit hopeless in its approach. And people around you will feel the difference. And
Yeah.
there's something which people want to be with people who are hopeful.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that without any evidence. Actually, I didn't read that anywhere, but there's this feeling that if I've got different people I can approach at a party, I'm going to want to go and have a chat to the people that I've had really positive,
Mm-hmm.
hopeful conversations with in the past. I'm kind of
Yeah.
drawn in that way to that kind of energy, I guess, that
Yeah.
positive energy.
There's a reason why Eeyore sits on his own in his gloomy place. If
Yeah,
anyone's ever read Winnie the Pooh as a small child, or even as an adult, actually,
yeah, yeah,
that you attract other people with a similar mindset. So I suppose
yeah,
even though you may feel sometimes that your resilience is low and a bit out of hope, you do have a choice, and to know the difference that that makes to your team. And I think if you are feeling hopeless, that's when you go and talk to friends,
yeah,
family, and
yeah,
get some help and support around that. I'm not saying
yeah,
choose to feel hopeful but it's a real battle, and that's in your heart, that's not what you're feeling. You've got to look after yourself and make sure you get the support you need.
Yeah.
But there's a knowing the ripple effect of your energy is so important, probably more
Yeah.
important than we even give it credit for.
I think that's right. I think that's right. I actually wrote down a couple of things of like how can we cultivate hope, and one of the
That's my
key things on
next
that list.
question.
Excellent. I'm glad we're going thinking in the same direction. But one of the key things I put on there, maybe let's go there next,
Yeah.
was around, I think I wrote, find a community of hopeful people. And
Yeah.
that it doesn't really matter where you find them, I don't think. I don't even think it matters if they work in the same sector as you or have any understanding whatsoever what you do. I don't think that matters. But just find other people who have that hopeful, joyful, kind of positive way of being, and they're also taking action. So you're seeing the action that they're taking from that hopeful kind of way of approaching life. And you can then build up your energy from that group, even if you then feel that your work community or culture doesn't have a lot of that. You almost like build it up elsewhere and then bring it into the workplace because you've got this energy that you can share. So I think finding a community of hopeful people is a great action. In fact, that's an action I'm gonna consciously step into after we finish recording this episode. I think it's so powerful.
I agree. That makes so much sense. And it comes back to some of the things that we've talked about before in terms of resilience. Like you've got to um, fill your bucket in order that you can deal with things that perhaps go wrong, don't go so well, things that are challenging, things that are difficult. And you might do that from within your role, but you might do it, you might look for things outside of work in order to help you to do that. And there's definitely, I think how people feel is almost infectious. You know that if you hang out with people who are joyful and bring you joy, that you're going to leave that meeting feeling better. You know that there's some people in your orbit when you've had a meeting with them or an interaction with them that you leave feeling less joyful than when you began. And I talk about this sometimes within training about managing your energy. And I don't suggest that you cut the people out who don't bring you joy, but what I do suggest is that you're deliberate about the time that you spend with those different groups in order that you're managing your energy and your feelings of, now in this context, hope.
Yeah, definitely. It is, a lot of it's around having intention, isn't it? And even
Yeah.
if you know that you have, a regular meeting with someone who actually leaves you feeling a bit hopeless by the end, knowing that you can build in a bit of a break, go for a walk, go meet someone who kind of fills you with hope again. Like there are just ways of being intentional about what we're doing with our time and who we spend time with. I think it's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's finding those people in your life who are naturally hopeful, who naturally have this way of looking at the world, and then it's not even an effort for them, and let it kind of wash over you almost.
Yes. And there's a difference there with the mindless optimism people. So this is my experience. So I'm interested just to hear what you think. So there's hopeful people that you hang out with and you leave the meeting feeling like hopeful. I can do this. I'm like, oh yeah, I am quite good at this. I can do this. I can get this done. Juliet, you're one of those for me. So thank you.
Excellent.
There are also people who almost have maybe too much energy and mindless optimism. I could say to them, I think I want to be a ballet dancer. And they'd be like, you'd be amazing. If any of you have ever met me, I would be a terrible ballet dancer. I'm really uncoordinated. I'd look terrible in a tutu. But almost it loses trust because whatever I say to some of these people, they'd be like, you'd be amazing, unconditional. And that is mindless optimism. It's not always the truth, even though it may come from a very honest and supportive place. So I think that there is a fine line there. And mindless optimism mustn't be confused with hope. What's your thoughts? Not about me being a ballet dancer. We're going to park that.
Okay, fine. However, what that analogy made me realize was that what the people with the mindless optimism do is they don't help you to understand the steps to get there. Like maybe there isn't any impossible dream.
Okay.
Maybe
Yeah, yeah.
anything is possible. So that's not necessarily mindless optimism. That's like an extreme growth mindset, which there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. But it's the people who are so mindlessly optimistic that they don't even help you to understand what are the 15 steps
Yes.
you might need to take to get to that point. So for example, I mean, it's not
Uh,
me, but some people kind of, mid 40s, 50s, I want to train to be a doctor. It's like, well, actually, there's like a lot of training years that go into becoming a medic. That's absolutely not impossible. There are people that do it, loads of people that do it. It's not
yeah.
impossible, but actually, a mindless optimist would just say, you can do it. You're amazing. Of course, you can do it.
Yeah. Doesn't
Whereas
matter
someone
if
who's
you're 80 by
hopeful,
the
no,
time that you
yeah,
qualify.
it's going to be fine. Where someone who's more has a hopeful mindset says, I love your enthusiasm. That's a brilliant goal. What's your first step? What's the pathway to making that
Yeah.
happen? Without kind of dipping into being a coach too much, which is kind of maybe why I'm kind of
Yeah,
accidentally
yeah.
falling into coaching someone without permission. But I think my conversation would then go around, yeah, 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 and brilliant. How can I help you with your first step?
Yeah.
Because actually, that's that missing part, isn't it? It's the
Yeah.
fact
You're
that there are steps that need to be taken, and some of those might be hard. They're not impossible, but they might be hard.
exactly right. So it's the enthusiasm, the positivity, the optimism, but it has to come with a action and a realistic
Yeah,
action. So, the person that says that they want to be trained to be a doctor in their 50s, that is a coaching
yeah,
course. That's like brilliant. Help me understand why you want
yeah.
to do that and what might that look like. And maybe they don't fully realize the amount of training that's needed, but there
Hmm.
might be a different solution where they'd be able to help people with their health, which might be the
Yeah,
underlying cause about why they want to do it.
yeah. So the mindless optimism has the future focus and it has the belief, but it completely misses the realistic goals
Yeah,
and the steps that are needed to achieve those goals. I think that's what's missing, isn't it, with the mindless
agreed.
optimism?
And
And it's
on
really
the
tempting, isn't it? Really tempting, but
but
it doesn't actually help people around you to be sort of constantly mindlessly optimistic.
and on the being on the receiving end of that can sometimes feel like maybe a disconnect of trust or that you've not
Yeah.
properly been heard. Um, and sometimes you might not be looking for somebody to be like, brilliant. You might be looking for somebody to say a challenge, like help me understand what does that
Yeah.
look like? That can still be hopeful.
Yeah.
It depends a bit on your sort of body language, tone of voice, and all those nuances.
Yeah, definitely. So how else can we cultivate hope? So it's all about being around people, sort of finding a community of hopeful people. We've talked quite a bit about having the goal, but having the action steps, kind of the
Mhm.
pathway that's going to get you there. What else do we think
I
helps?
think we've talked a little bit about deliberate choices,
Hmm.
and I think that there's something in there around trust. So if I'm thinking, around leading a team or being part of a team, trust and belief is an important part of hope, combined with the action steps
Hmm.
and where you're going, and cultivating that within your team, which comes back to again some of the things that we talk about high performance in teams around getting to know people, understanding how you can best help them to do their best work, build confidence, because
Mm.
self-confidence comes from a trust or a belief in yourself that you can do the thing, whatever it is. And you can't always get that from external validation, but the external validation plus your own internal validation builds up
Mm.
to that. So if being hopeful is like, I believe that I can do this,
Hmm.
building that psychological safety trust within your team is key to helping your team feel hopeful.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah,
come
definitely.
to.
So what fitted into my mind there was there is an element of looking back as well as looking forward. So hopefulness is future focused, but if we're going to build that belief and that self-confidence, a key ingredient there is helping an individual or a team to look back at things that they have achieved. the things that have gone well,
Yeah.
as well as building the resilience, which comes from talking about a time that actually it didn't go, plan A didn't work, and what were the alternatives that you explored, and then how did you get there in the end, or equally importantly, sometimes how did the goal shift to make it something that actually was possible and realistic. So there's a little bit of backward facing reflection in there as well, isn't there?
Yeah. And there's, I think for me, that comes back to a regular practice of
Mm,
reflecting on what you've done, what's gone well, what you're pleased with or proud of, that I encourage people to do on a regular basis. And the thing that we've talked about in a different episode about confidence, about what I called a book of truths. So you write down the things that you're pleased with or proud of that you've done.
yeah,
That's sort of around your self-confidence. You keep a note of when other people have said, well done, thank you, great job, and the feedback that you get from others. And then the third part of that was, and as a team member or leader, helping other people fill up their book of truths. So being more deliberate about giving feedback generally, and praise and positive feedback when it is deserved.
yeah, positive recognition. We all
Yeah.
crave recognition, and you know sometimes that feedback will be constructive and be ways that you can improve, but ensuring that you're also giving and then recording what you're receiving, that positive recognition that you're receiving for things that have gone well.
And then when you do have a little bit of self-doubt or a little bit of a wobble, that happens to all of us
Mm-hmm.
at one point or another, you've got some record of, oh, hang on, I've done this before, I've done something like this before. Um, I've got this, I can do
Yeah,
it, which is an
yeah,
important component in feeling hopeful.
definitely. I think we should put a link to that episode. I think it was Why Does Your
Yeah,
Confidence Ebb and Flow, I think
that's
was the
it.
episode name, because I think that's a key component of what we're talking about here, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What else? What else can we do to cultivate trust? Oh, sorry, cultivate hope. Oh, that was interesting. I said trust there instead. I think that's probably a key
Hmm.
element. But what are we doing to cultivate hope?
I'm going to give an example that you may or may not like. So we had a conversation fairly recently um, about positive reinforcement, as I'm telling my dog, "Well done, good boy." And then we had a barbecue, and I was giving Juliet a lot of positive reinforcement as she was turning the stuff
As a
on the
novice
barbecue. It was a,
barbecuer, yes.
and Juliet said something to me like, I feel like I'm being facilitated this and I'm enjoying all this positive reinforcement. And I was like, it was an informal barbecue, but I've gone into facilitation mode. I'm happy with that. But there's something around being really deliberate about positive reinforcement, because when
Yeah,
we are told we're doing something well, we'll keep doing it and we feel good about it. And for me, it comes back to that component of hope is I believe I can do this thing. Um, Maybe this isn't the best example it's not a
my
work-based
burger
example, but
flipping expertise. Yes, but it
it was
is.
really good, Juliet. You
It's.
did really, really good.
Thank you. I managed to not burn too many things, which was good.
Was,
No, no, it is true. And actually, as you say that, it's positive reinforcement that comes from inside and from outside. And so we were just talking about it from the context of building confidence, but actually, I
yeah,
think it applies back to our previous conversation on hope, because if we recognize, if we have an awareness of what hope is, then we can create a
yeah,
positive reinforcement around, okay, I approach that challenge with a hopeful mindset or with a hopeful approach,
yeah,
and actually realizing that enabled me to XYZ really well. And next time I want to do ABC better, and this is how I might improve that particular element of it. So I think you're right. It's positive reinforcement combined with a knowledge of what hope is and the key components that go
yeah.
into it.
And I suppose within that, there's positive reinforcement and being really deliberate about it. That doesn't mean to say that you're not candid about feedback. Like
Yeah.
there was one burger that was on the hot bit, and I suggested that you
And you
moved it to
moved it
the
for me.
edge. Yeah. But it's being, I suppose it's a feedback culture, and it's being candid about
Yeah.
feedback. So you trust that if you're doing a good job, you're going to be told and you'll know what to keep doing. And if
Yeah.
there's things that you could be improving on, that you also trust that you will be told about that. And that doesn't matter
Yeah.
in terms of hierarchy. That
Yeah.
is about building trust in a team, and therefore for me that
Definitely.
connects very strongly
Yeah.
to hope.
So one of the downsides, maybe it slips into the mindless optimism rather than hope kind of as itself. But if you slip into that point of view of everything's amazing, therefore I don't need to question the status quo. I don't need to seek feedback on, a particular product or service or the way that I'm operating in my team. I don't seek out enough viewpoints or enough data,
Yeah.
then actually that is tipping over into the mindless optimism. So I think
Mm.
hope, it allows us to be constantly seeking additional feedback, additional information, different data, different viewpoints,
Yeah.
because actually, if we've got a kind of rooting it in a growth mindset point of view, we're saying there are always things that we can improve. There are always different
Yeah.
points of view about what it is that we're focusing on and prioritizing.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe one thing to be aware of is hope should enable you and encourage you to seek out opportunities for feedback and of different viewpoints and data. And if you're slipping into the
Yeah.
mindless optimism, that's probably being shut down because that means it can then challenge the status quo. And if your mindless optimism is based on everything's going to be amazing because it's going to be fine, there's
Yeah.
something that fails to then look for opportunities for improvement,
Yeah.
I think.
And in there, that with mindless optimism, there might be something that fails to look at the changing landscape, and different obstacles will come along
Yeah.
with which you need those data sets in order to be able to figure out a different way of
Yeah.
overcoming them. So mindless optimism does feel a little bit, in a way, like you've got your head in the sand. Everything's going to be great no matter what, but with no plan or action or kind of agency
Yeah.
attached to it.
Yeah. And actually, that's one of the contexts in which I sometimes hear a criticism of, it's normally described as overly optimistic, which is kind of another way of framing mindless optimism, maybe, but is
Mm,
sometimes I hear that phrase used when we're talking about risk. So a leader maybe not analyzing or
mm,
not noticing that a risk is actually bigger than it might be presented, than they might be presenting it, so
mm.
that others around them are saying, well, so this leader is very optimistic, but that is preventing them from identifying risks in the environment or risks within the organization, which then aren't being mitigated or addressed because they
Exactly.
are
It's
optimistic that it will all be fine, everything will be fine. So I think maybe one of the other things to be looking out for is, yes, you want to be hopeful, and that should be encouraging you to identify risks,
yes.
opportunities, signals from the marketplace, signals from your team and the kind of the people that are working within the organization. And that is, it's the hope is that you seek out all of those signals, not
Yeah.
that you downplay the risks or
Yeah,
the opportunities.
absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely. And I think that that is the difference between the definition of hope that we're talking about here and my understanding of hope last week before I started
yeah,
to
yeah,
look into it, that hope is about action. It's about focusing on the goals, action and belief that you can do it, and that you can overcome challenges, and in order to overcome the challenges you need to identify what
yeah,
they are, and that
yeah,
is all about mitigating or managing um,
yeah,
risk. But mindless optimism is like, it doesn't matter what's happening, I've got kind of blinkers on, that I believe that we can do it no matter
yeah,
what.
yeah.
And that, unfortunately, is not as simple as that. That's not often the case.
I think what's lovely about this actually is, I'm probably both for this, but I'm speak for myself, that actually having researched it, I can now see the difference. And now I've got
Yeah.
a kind of an arsenal of words, of descriptions, of things that I can talk to people about when they say, oh, you're overly optimistic. Okay, let's just unpack. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does hope involve? And so, one of the key takeaways that I'd like to invite, dear listener, as you're listening to this, is this new understanding, or at least new to me, maybe not to you, I don't know, understanding that hope is different from optimism, that it's really rooted in, yes, future focus, yes, positive emotion and positive belief and self-confidence, but also in action.
Yeah.
And that it's that key element that can sometimes be missing. And so that's a good way to kind of an antidote, I think, Lucy, to
Yeah.
the world as it is today, potentially.
Exactly.
What would you
Yeah.
invite people to take away from today's conversation?
I think be really clear when you're talking about hope. what your meaning of it is. And really, to echo what you just said, Juliet, that for me, hope is around setting where you're going, a belief, I can do this, but the action and steps to get there, and being prepared that it won't always work, and what your plan B, C, D, etc. is, and the
Yeah.
importance of you have a choice about what your mindset to be, whether we call it hopeful or hopeless or growth mindset or fixed mindset. You have a choice about how you approach a situation, and if you lead a team, your mindset and energy and views will have a really big impact on the energy of the team. So just being aware of that and making an active choice about how you're going to show up in order that you and the team can hopefully achieve the goals that you've set.
Hopefully achieve them with hope. I love it. Excellent. So how do you help people with this? Because even
I
though hope
take
is
them.
possibly a newer concept to both of us, actually, the growth mindset, a lot of what we've talked about,
Yeah.
this is what we do with clients all the time, isn't it? Even
Yeah.
though this particular definition of this one word might be a little bit newer for us.
Yeah. I mean, I work directly one to one with leaders about helping to create team environments that are high performing, and I train and facilitate sessions for teams, helping them to do the same.
Mm.
Hope is a big part of the work that I do, although I don't think I used that word and hadn't fully realised it until this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Juliet, how about you?
Yeah, so helping leaders one to one to understand how to balance various different elements of their personality, of leadership, is basically what I do all the time. And this is one element that I've now added to my vocabulary. And yeah, and the action point for me going out of this, I actually have a list of 6 core values. One of them was optimism, and I am renaming it hope as a result of the research that I've been doing and the conversation we've had. So yes, hoping
I
to
love that.
spread the word of hope further and further.
Fabulous.
So let's wrap up our conversation around hope. So thank you for spending your time with us today. I'm Juliet Corbett, an executive coach and strategist working one to one with senior leaders.
And I'm Lucy Gower, a facilitator, trainer, and coach helping leaders develop high performing teams. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with colleagues and help leverage the impact of the quiet leadership revolution.